Well, I've got Duane Maktima. Got it right, didn't I?
Got it right.
Maktima.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Hopi's really crappy. Quite honestly.
Well, it's a difficult language to pronounce.
Hard.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that just so hard?
I don't know.
A's, E's, O's, U's, Y's.
All languages is in some ways are, because we're so used to already another language. So it's so different. I guess how we are taught.
Yeah, I do find it extreme more than anything. I don't know why. Yeah. I just have Hawaiiana. The Hawaiian language I find also very difficult. I think it's all the A's, E's, O's, U's.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not a linguist, but yeah, I do understand those. But where I learned the language was from singing.
And just to let people know, by the way, Duane is Laguna. His mom was from Laguna, and Hopi. So he grew up at both, and we're going to talk about this. Just so people out there know, we've got one of the world's master silversmith jewelers who's happens to come to Tucson. We show his work. We're thrilled to have him. So that's who we're talking to. Now tell me about this with you were talking about the language and how you learned with songs?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate. I come from two families that were, in some ways, very unique. Maktima was my grandfather's Indian name. He was Hopi originally from Old Oribe, but at the year 1906, when he was about 6 years old, the Oribe split took place. It was a prophesized split of the Hopi people, that one faction would leave this area and migrate north back to their original homeland. And the village that they went to was Hotvilla, which is the newest village out in. Actually, no, it'd be one of the newest villages. One copy would be the other, and New Oribe would be another Kokachmovi. On my mom's side, Laguna side, same thing happened there, a split, but happened probably 50 to 60 years before the Hopi split.
So on that 1906 split, your dad, who was about 6 years old, went to
my grandfather.
Your grandfather. I'm sorry, probably be too long for you.
Yeah.
And he went to
Hotvilla
at
with
that
the Snake Clan.
Yes.
Yeah, Snake Clan group. And on my mother's side, the it's really ironic, but based on the same thing that happened there there was from the traditional point of view, there was an argument that started because of accepting progressive ways of another culture infiltrating their domain, which was going to change landmarks because of the transportation systems. That was the main thing.
Was this in the 1850s? Happened?
1850. The railroad said after the Civil War.
Right.
The government sent out surveyors all over to the west to start expanding the American dream was starting to be born, so the Homestead Act.
And the train came in there about, 1878, wasn't it?
Yeah, somewhere in there, but the railroad was there. I guess the engineers were out there way before
I'm sure that's true.
The government was surveying all the lands, so after the Civil War. And so that when that started happening, you had federal people coming out with the government authority of the United States putting stakes all over your land, and the traditional people said, "What are you doing here? You have no authority here." And of course, that's not the way the federal government thinks. So that was their first, how would you say, test about how they were gonna, how they're going to react to this kind of thing. Well, they lost. I mean, one of the things they did at Laguna means lake. Or lagoon, has to do with water. In our traditional language, Kawek, that's what that means. That's the language, the name of the village, the Laguna people, Kawekame. So, so there was a sacred lake there, and it had been there from time immemorial. That's what that whole, it's a sacred lake.
Where is that in relationship to the Pueblo?
It's just Pueblo? Right there, like half a mile west of there. And it was a natural formed lake by a volcanic eruption at Mount Taylor. the lava flow dammed up the San Jose River and backed it up. And so it's very significant that lake just in itself, prehistorically, goes back thousands of years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because people had settled all around that whole Mount Taylor area, north, south, east, west, or all around Mount Taylor. It must have been a very, because you find, you find ancient things all over the place back there.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate that I went back home to my Laguna heritage side, which we follow our mother's clans. I'm Parrot clan.
And you kind of grew up more on the Hopi side, right?
I grew up more on the Hopi side, when I was young. Even though I had to live in a border town, Holbrook, Arizona, I grew up there. Because of the, my dad took advantage of the GI Bill after the Korean War, went to Northern Arizona University.
And he was Hopi.
And he was Hopi, full-blooded. And, but the story that really is unique in our family is that group of people from Haute-Villa were really strong, conservative Hopi people, but because of the incidences that happened soon after they're going to Haute-Villa from the Oribe split prophecy, was that they imprisoned all the leaders of the Hopi clans from that side, and that was the group that was sent to Alcatraz.
And when were they sent to Alcatraz?
That was probably a year or two after that, because they didn't want to conform to United States federal policy.
Wasn't that part of that with Indian school too, that they wanted to send?
Yeah, they didn't want their kids being educated, or they didn't want nothing having to do with the American thought, or changing. They had their how would you say, their traditions to uphold and to keep them, which they had always lived off of, for years and years. And now unfortunately, we're seeing the negative results of the aspects of that today, contemporarily, and in all Native people all over we have the same problems, like, as any culture in the United States. And right now we're having to re-deal with holding on to those traditions. And so part of my emphasis in what I do as a jeweler was to be a teacher. As I went all the way to NAU and graduated in fine arts at Northern Arizona, and I really wanted to be a teacher, which I did. I did for like 15 years.
I got to find out about these people that went to Alcatraz.
Yeah,
I think that people. How many
people
went to? How many people? Elders were.
Well, there's actually a lot of good documentation about that whole endeavor.
And how many went to Alcatraz? Do you know?
Oh, they were all Kiva. Clan leaders.
Yes.
And society leaders. I don't know. From a picture that I'm kind of visualizing in my head, at least 10 or 12 leaders went.
And how long were they there?
Well, they were there for like 2 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, because
was your family part of that?
Oh,
too?
yeah. In fact, I have a first cousin, Nick Broke Shoulder, who his dad is Shawnee, so that's where that name comes from. But his mother was my dad's sister. He's got a master's degree in what is it? Well, he helps veterans. That's what he's doing. He works in the Gallup. University of New Mexico Annex in Gallup, and he helps veterans through the UNM branch. And he's been doing a lot of research on the family, which has been really interesting. But according to him, he just told me that I didn't really know this, because it's some, Native people or Pueblo people, even other tribes, say you never talk about the past. It's kind of like, I think that's just something that's in all cultures, because my grandfather used to tell me this all the time. He used to tell me, never look back, always look forward. He said.
So that was never brought up?
No, not
when
really.
You were a kid?
Not really.
Were you even aware of it?
I was aware of it when I went to college.
Yeah.
Because I took United States Contemporary U.S. Indian History.
Yeah, but before that, just was
it
never
was never
spoken.
talked about.
Interesting.
Yeah. My grandfather told me stories about his own personal life, which was very, very interesting. Maktima. And also my Laguna grandfather, who I spent equal time with both I only had a grandfather on my Hopi side. My grandmother, my dad's mother, died when my dad was 6 years old. And so that was kind of a sad thing for my family, my dad's side of the family. On my mother's side, I did have a grandmother, which was really unique too, but I mean, you can imagine how these things tore the people apart.
Sure.
And in 1919, there were 78 families recruited by the Santa Fe Railroad as a result of this. The federal government taking over the lands, and basically
these are the Hopis.
Yeah, the Hopis and Lagunas and all the people of the Southwest. Mm-hmm. Basically, the United States still owns everything, the land and everything, but the reservations, which are reserves, are just trust lands, I guess, so that we're the liaisons of it. So that's one thing that I learned as going to college and studying more about treaties and so there was a big emphasis from our two families to be sovereign people, and the only way they saw fit to do that was to excel and advise their children and their offspring to go to college. That was the way to do. How would you say not to defeat it, but to compromise.
Right. And how did that relate to the 1919?
Well, in 1919, there were 78 families that moved to Winslow, Arizona.
I see.
Because of the railroad. Around 1916, 17, the Santa Fe Railroad was moving west fast. And so they came to Laguna Feast Day, September 19th, in one of those years, and they had a recruiting booth. And they were signing up young married couples. Well, this is one thing that I just realized several years ago, was that being my wife is San Felipe Pueblo, and all Pueblo people are all similar. They're very, very basically the same culture, same kind of people. Mm-hmm. The Hopis are part of that group, Zunis, and they're very tight, close people. And I grew up off the reservation, but still went home a lot. But I saw the freedom I had being a contemporary, and when I found I was dating my wife, I would go there, and they speak their language all the time, and anything outside is treated very skeptical. They're very skeptical of anything, and so when I came there, it was like, oh, who is this guy showing up to take one of our girls,
right,
on a date? I felt very, how would you say,
ostracized.
I was very, but I had to prove it. I have to prove myself, basically, that I was a good guy, and I came from values similar to theirs, which it wasn't hard. I just had to be, how would you say, a contributing friend at first, help chop wood and do all that stuff for the that the boys do. And I saw that when they do things, they do it in a family. Like, everybody has to know what everybody's doing, and it's a good thing when you come from a community like that, because everybody takes care of everybody's kids
and knows everything what's going on.
Yeah, and they know what's going on. It's amazing how something happens in a village, and next day the whole village knows. So it's checks and balances, which is really good for the community. So you grow up knowing what's good and what's not good to do. So,
and was your family from the Laguna side, one of those 1919 that ended up going to Winslow?
Yeah, they went to Winslow, Arizona. So I grew up. My mother was born in Laguna Pueblo, but just so my grandmother would go home to have their children. And then she would, because they had railroad passes, they could go back and forth from Winslow to Laguna. Mm-hmm. There was a train station, believe it or not, at New Laguna, which is just a mile or 2 miles away from.
Well, it goes right by. The train goes right by.
Yeah, it goes
Laguna, right.
We used to go right around the village.
On the back side, north side?
The steam locomotives would go on the south side where the freeway is.
Yeah, where it is now.
Yeah, where it is today. But Laguna, because there too was a prophecy from when I went back home in the 70s. I wanted to live and know my family there, because I was.
And you were 19 at this time.
I was 19 years old, and I had been kind of, how would you say, just never knew. I would go home frequently, like holidays and days for vacation at school. I would go home with my grandparents.
But you grew up in Holbrook.
Yeah,
right?
I grew up in Holbrook.
And was that pretty integrated between whites, Mexican, Hispanic?
Yeah, Holbrook is a border town,
right.
Which is. It's like all the towns: Flagstaff, Winslow, Holbrook, Gallup, all kinds of people, because of the railroad, basically. And there were trade centers.
And how many Native Americans were in?
We're very fortunate in Holbrook, Winslow, for instance. I grew up in Winslow too, we had I would say at least 40% of the population in those two towns are Native American.
And was a great percent of those from Laguna?
No,
Laguna, or just everywhere, Navajo and
there was Navajos, Hopis, and Laguna is primarily in Winslow. I mean, yeah, and so but that experience for growing up in a community like that was good for my parents, because there was no. There was really, everybody was treated the same. It was a community, and it was all the core that
you didn't feel racial divide.
No, there was no racial
not even
division,
in the 60s.
Not even then.
That's interesting.
It was very interesting, and but like the sports is what all these nationalities played sports. In Winslow, my dad was an all-state runner. You know.
I know those. I was a runner. In Portales. Cross country. We were so afraid of.
Laguna runner, Acoma, and the Jemez runners.
All those guys.
Yeah,
it was
they
like
were awesome.
We knew we were just gonna get our butts kicked every time.
So I grew up. On my cousin Nick Brokeshoulder, who was doing all this research. God, about 10 years ago, found an article at where my Hopi grandfather ended up going to school was at Sherman Institute, Riverside, California, which is an Indian school. And this was in 10, 11, somewhere in there.
And did he have a good experience?
Oh, yeah.
He did.
Well, the unique thing about my Hopi grandfather was that he was kind of an orphan. It's kind of a long story. Try to get to... A lot of these points are really critical about how I ended up where I'm at.
Yeah, I want to know that.
Is the fact that, his grandfather was killed working in his cornfields and by a Navajo raiding party.
And this was early on, right? He was only 6 when he died?
He was probably 5 years old. 4 or 5 years old.
So that was right at the turn of the century.
Yeah. And then they were still living in Old Oribe. And he told me this story, which probably really impacted his whole life. But because about 2 years later, this split was starting to really get intense. This division among Hopi people, progressives and traditional. That's the split I'm talking about. One group was saying, and it was all based on clans or kivas that were, the societies that were saying that this is what this one group was wanting. They wanted the U.S. federal government to come in and give them education and give them a better life, quote, so to speak. The other groups were the traditionalists saying, no, we've survived all these years. Why do we need that?
Yeah, that's a Hopeville split.
That was the Snake Clan people. Yeah. My grandfather was part of that group. So his mother remarried, and he married the man, the family, which is from Second Mesa, were the Sikakukus. She married into that family there. And so what happened there was he wasn't accepted by his stepfather. So he ended up one day playing, and this is in the days when they had the 3-storied houses, and they had the ladder to get up to the main living quarter. And one day he was coming home, and he said his mother pulled the ladder up and couldn't come home.
How old was he?
He was, 6 years old, 5, 6 years old. 5 years old. He had to be around 5.
Wow.
Because he ended up going back to Old Oribe for a year, and that's when they had the split, and he had to leave.
And so since he didn't...
He went back to Old Oribe. His mother told him to go back to live with his grandmother. But he didn't know. He was just... that's the way it was in them days. It was a harsh way of, you didn't...
So he grew up with his grandmother.
He had sisters, which are, how would you say, they're helpful in the household, which the stepfather didn't mind keeping them.
Yeah, he saw worth somehow.
Yeah, but
or they didn't talk back or something.
Yeah,
maybe.
But no, I guess my grandfather, the way he talks about himself, he goes, "I guess I was a bad kid." That's all he could say,
Well, I'm sure he felt that way because he got kicked out at 6 and told to go live with your grandmother.
And so he ended up going. He walked the whole way back to Old Oribe.
How far is that?
It's like 20 miles.
At 6.
At 6 years old. And he said he was chased when he got outside of the village of Shipalabi, is where they lived, and or Meshangavi, one of the two. Anyway, he said that he got outside the village, and there was an old man with a burro coming down the road with a load of wood on it, And like I was saying, everybody watches what goes on, and he saw this little boy walking out the village and said, "Hey, where are you going? You're not supposed to be out here." And he says, He didn't answer him. He just took off, and that man started chasing him, and he jumped off the cliff and went down and hid in some boulders in a hole somewhere. And that man, he said he could see him walking around calling for him, but he didn't come out until it was dark.
And then he started
then
walking.
Then he got out of there and started walking to Old Oribe, and he made it over there eventually. And then this thing was going on with the split. The clans
at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. It's all documented. There's really good books on it and history in libraries about this, and that's where I kind of read about it as well. Wanted to reconfirm what my grandfather was telling me.
When did he start sharing those stories with you?
Probably when I was inquisitive enough to want to know, and I was probably around 14 years old.
Could you tell? That must have really devastated him.
It devastated all that whole generation was devastated.
I mean that's so
traumatic on both sides. I remember going to Laguna Feast Day with my grandparents from Laguna, and I remember the families where the traditionals were ousted and at Old Laguna, and they were told to leave. They ended up in Laguna Pueblo, south of Albuquerque. And so those people would come to Laguna Pueblo and for the feast days because they'd come and visit their families. And I remember my grandmother just crying when those the visitors from Isleta would just be crying, hugging each other.
It's like East Berlin, West Berlin coming back together.
That's exactly the way it was. And they would cry, and the Isleta people, they still retain the Laguna language, but they spoke Isleta too. They would be you could understand, but they were saying they wish it wasn't like that, and they wish that it would get back together somehow.
Is that relationship still there between Isleta and
well, now
Laguna?
What I've heard just lately in the last, they have it's a viable thing where the Isleta Laguna people still acknowledge Laguna as part of their home. So there's been some what would you call them, convocations or conferences where the two sides have gotten together and kind of have talked about this, like in a forum, and to heal. It's healing.
Neither of these are big populations, right? These are very small.
But still, on the other hand, they retain the Isleta group took all the real traditional stuff with them. So all that stuff's over there, which.
And again, this is early on. This is like 1870.
Yeah, 1870, 65 from there on out.
Around the Civil War.
After that. But no, the federal government came in there and they blasted that dam, that natural volcanic dam.
Where your lake was?
Yeah, where the lake was. And it's called in our language, it's called Coyotracama, which is the old lady lake, which has been there for time immemorial. It's a sacred lake because how would you say that's where the spirits come from? What would you call the spirit dancers that come? And
like kachina.
Yeah, and even the Rio Grande Pueblos called it a special name too.
And then the government.
Yeah, took that away because they're.
And when was that? When did they do that?
It's documented too. That was probably It was probably around that time. That's what made that. That's probably
70.
what made that happen. Was the fact that they allowed that to happen. And so, what do? There's a dry lake bed with shrines all around it.
Well, plus you need water.
Yeah,
Right?
And it really impacted the whole culture because that was their irrigation. What would you call it? Their reservoir for irrigating.
Wow.
And so those lands that are below it now, they don't farm that anymore.
And they can't bring that back.
No, they can't bring that back.
Yeah, because it was a natural.
It's just sad how that all entailed. And, of course, the railroad came through there. And that was another reason they wanted to get that dam out of there because the railroad line goes right through the lake.
Mm-hmm.
It goes right through the middle of it.
That's why they wanted it.
Yeah.
Land.
So, and then another thing, when you talk about how they train military, what do you call it?
Code talkers?
Yeah, the military officials, officers, or
Yes.
like West Point.
Yes.
There's classes. This is what I heard in taking college courses was.
This was at NAU?
Yeah, this is one way they would conquer a culture is that you take their religious people away from them. They have nothing.
Yeah.
You take their landmarks away.
And they were doing this in 1919. They're coming and recruiting to conquer and divide, right?
Well, so this is where I get back to that point of having real close-knit families. Mm-hmm. Is one day it just snapped. It dawned on me, not just recently. I mean, like maybe 3 years ago, I started thinking about this. I always was growing up very perplexed about where do I belong, you know?
Right.
Why as being an artist, it wasn't really something I really thought about until I became an artist.
Yeah, because everybody always asks, right?
Yeah, they ask what your heritage is.
Yeah, are you Hopi Laguna?
Yeah.
I do. Should I call you Laguna Hopi? Hopi
right.
Laguna.
And so, at Hopi, they don't like me saying that I'm Laguna. It's funny, but they know it. But I've just been very proud of both sides of my family. I grew up, fortunately, knowing everybody on both my family directly on both sides, gotten to know more and more about who I am because of my generation. We're all I see a lot of these artists at shows and places have to do with Indian art. So it's really cool how now today we can talk about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Way back then, you didn't really talk about it, and so now I'm thinking that that today being an artist is that knowing it really did have an impact about how I evolved as an artist.
How is that, do you think?
Oh, because I'm thinking now that I'm looking at my people, like I'm for instance in the 70s, and I'm looking at like amazing that they're still retaining this unique culture because the elders were still alive, the last generations of that real Hopi way of life, where the real Laguna people, the older elders. Mm-hmm. And I went home and I got to see that. I got to experience it,
at both cultures.
Mm-hmm. And some of them didn't even talk English. Mm-hmm. And of course they didn't like me. I mean, because I was a city boy. To them, I'm a city boy.
Very much so. Could you speak either Hopi or Laguna?
Little bit,
both?
Yeah, both. And but then that was the reason for me going back to Laguna was to really learn it. Mm. And so, how I really got into the for instance, on my mother's side, was my grandfather took me to the men's lodge, the Kiba meeting, to meet all the men. And one of my Indian names that I have on my Laguna side happens to be a name that was given to me because I'm a bow hunter. I shoot bow and arrow a lot. And so the name they gave me was from an old man who had passed on, but was the last, quote, warrior belonged to the War Society of Laguna. So everybody knew him, and his name was Gaishtua. And it's quiver. That's what it means. Gaishtua. It means the pocket that holds the arrows.
Right.
And there are a lot of really neat, amazing stories about it. There was still a lot of older men that lived in Laguna that knew him. And so when my grandfather introduced me at the meeting to the men, he told them, his name is Gaishtua. I just saw these old men they were shocked and it's like that reincarnation type of thing.
Yeah, they saw the relationship.
Yeah, and ever since then I couldn't believe it was like as soon as the meeting was over, all these elders came to me, and with what little bit of English they could. I didn't speak Laguna at that time. They were telling me that they were so grateful that I came home to learn to meet to be with them.
Yeah.
And because they knew my mother, they knew the family, and they said anything you want to learn, my door's open. You
and
come
your
in
mom,
and visit.
did she grow up at
Laguna?
Yeah,
she grew up there, and so they all knew my mother, which was great. And my clan is there, the Parrot clan people. And so it was a real opening experience. I was welcome.
That must have been really emotional.
It was very emotional. I felt like I was home.
You found a connection.
I was home, and everybody was so glad that I was home. It was like one of their offspring came back to to be a part of them.
And how old were you at this time? 18, 19?
I was 19, 20 years old at the time. So it was a good time, and that's where inevitably I met my wife, who's from San Felipe, but her best friend was my cousin, one of my distant, extended family cousins. And her The reason why Jan, my wife, went to Laguna was because she didn't have a grandmother, and she had gone to Laguna before with her just to visit, and her grandmother accepted Jan just like her own granddaughter.
So she had a connection to Laguna.
And then it turns out my grandmother and her grandmother, they were best friends all their lives.
From San Felipe?
No, from Laguna.
Yeah, but her
my cousin's grandmother, and my grandmother.
I got it. Okay.
They grew up together.
And did you meet her in Laguna?
Oh yeah.
You met your wife?
I met my wife there. It's really funny, but even at Hopi, there's always this aunties and grandmothers always watching out who you hang out with, and especially with girls or opposite sex, and they would tell you, you're related to that girl, don't you? If you go and talk to somebody and said, how am I related? So, you're this clan and she's this clan.
And they want to keep you away from that.
Yeah, they want to keep you away from that. And you just get to a point where like, God, I'm related to everybody, that kind of thing. And it's actually, there actually is a metaphor for that. There's stories about that, and I learned later on, as I learned the culture, was, it's a way of keeping incest away from the community.
And it's better for
and
your genetics
it's
too.
even advised that if you could find somebody else from another village and bring her into it makes the genetics more stronger.
That's right. Well, in the Navajos, they're very careful about that.
Yeah.
They give both sides of the clan before when they meet. You're supposed to.
Yeah. Well, they do the same in the Pueblo culture too.
Yeah.
And at Hopi, it's really, really watched. As soon as you bring somebody around or talk to somebody, it's really watched over there. It's really funny. But no, but it's really amazing. They accept my wife Jan at Hopi like one of their own. Of course they have a name for in-laws.
And in a way she is, because your kids are partially Hopi.
Yeah. So,
Hopi, Laguna, and San Felipe, right?
Yeah, it makes a stronger, family connection throughout the whole Pueblo world, I think. And so, when I got married, you follow the wife's side. So I'm married at San Felipe. You had a traditional wedding there and all that. And I had to bring, like you said, had a meeting between all the families.
Yep.
And they go and they tell you, he's not a perfect kid. He tells you all the garbage you did to your family when you're growing up. And of course, the parents said, "Well, are you sure you want our daughter? Because she can be this way, or she can, they just tell you everything." And they say, "Oh yeah, I already." But it was true love. That's the way I.
Yeah, and you've been married for like 40 years.
40 years, yeah. So
when you go to NAU, what do you get your degree in at that time?
Well, I started off in forestry, which is really unique. I love being in the outdoors because of my dad's job. I guess that's where that comes from. And he worked for the United States Forest Service.
So he was a forester too.
Yeah.
And you hadn't made any jewelry or had any?
No, I was a carver. I grew up being Hopi. My grandfather.
So you were making Hopi kachinas.
Yeah, I was doing Hopi carvings and.
Were you any good at it?
Yeah, I was really good. Yeah, but see.
Are there any out there that I can find that have your name on them?
Yeah, in fact, somebody sent me a picture of one. You know who carried my work a lot was Quintanas.
Oh yeah,
way back. Yeah. My dad worked at the Phoenix area office in his last. He had worked for the Federal Forest Service for many, many years, and then he decided to change the department. So he moved to Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs. So he didn't really want to move to Phoenix, but it was a great opportunity for advancing, and his what do you call it, his government service rating. And
his rating would go up.
Yeah, would really go up. So he decided to move there. I didn't really like Phoenix. I moved there my senior year in high school.
Oh God, yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
What was that like, going from a very inclusive area like Holbrook, Winslow, and then you go to Phoenix?
I didn't last. I was very fortunate in a way. I got there. I must have stayed there 2 weeks, and I called my aunt in Flagstaff and says, I would like to come up and live with you and I'll work. For the summer. It was my junior. I was going to be my senior year in high school. And she goes, "Oh yeah, come on up." So I got me a job dishwashing at one of the restaurants, Bob's Big Boy in Flagstaff by the university. I didn't care whatever it was, to get me out of Phoenix. And I loved the mountain country. So I go there for the summer, and I proved myself to my aunt. I was a hard worker. I worked 2 shifts all day long for that whole summer at Bob's Big Boy. And I was really liked there. I became a cook. What do you call it? A cook's helper or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was just real focused on work. And so I ended up I went to Moon Valley High School in Phoenix. That's where my dad bought a house there. That was the end of town, 35th Avenue in Cactus.
Yeah.
Right there from there on was cotton fields
right.
and orange groves.
Right.
So went to Moon Valley High School, was right across the street, a new housing development that was built. My dad bought a house there. And then I only went like a month, and the counselors called me and says, oh, you already have all your credits. All you need to do is take 2 classes in the morning, and you're done.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a job at a gas station. So
you got a gas station job in Phoenix, did your 2 credits so you could get away.
I got graduated, and then I left home. I ended up going to San Carlos to work for the Forest Service because I loved working in the mountains. And I was a firefighter at San Carlos. My uncle worked there. He was married there at San Carlos, so he got me a job there. And then, so my ambition was to be a forester. That was I majored in forestry.
Your dad had done it. You understood
at
it.
NAU. And here, the first year we get in there, 2 months into the program, they called all the freshman class into the auditorium at the School of Forestry and said, "We'd like to give you an update here because." By the time you guys graduate, the job market's going to be so saturated with conservation people that we're recommending you might try to find another major to, fill your whatever you want to do in your life.
Right.
And we all just looked at each other in our freshman class. There was probably about 100 of us, and said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?"
Yeah, no, that's
I had no idea what I was going to do.
They're basically saying, go find another job.
Yeah, go find another job. And
of course, we need all these people now.
So the one thing I don't know was really unique. One of the things I thought about was, the other thing I guess I could do is I've always had these unique teachers in my growing up. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I learn now as I become an adult how that process worked a little bit. I guess when you're a kid, you take those little tests, and if you feel that upper whatever that requirement is, certain teachers get the first pick.
Right.
So I was always in this really eclectic group of kids growing up in elementary school, and we all stayed together through our elementary years. So these teachers we had were phenomenal. I can think of them right away: Mrs. Ellsworth, Mr. DeMars in Holbrook, Arizona, and probably the most big influence I ever had was Mr. Provencio, my 6th grade teacher.
And why was that?
Because Mr. Provencio was a Mexican American from Morenci, Arizona, and he had always. I was a very shy, didn't really fit in. I really felt myself as being a Native American. You don't use that word in them days in the '60s.
What did you use? Indian?
They just called us Indians, and we all sat. They all put us in one row.
People say that, my Indian friends, I call them Indians. Yeah. I don't look at that as
I don't think it as anything derogative or nothing.
Okay.
I just basically just treat me the way
right.
as a friend.
Yeah. So this teacher made this huge difference.
He made a big impact on me. He made me the star of everything, which I didn't really want.
Yeah, that's why he did it.
Yeah, but I was very shy, very introverted. And I remember one year he made me be Santa Claus for the school play for Christmas, and I didn't want. I told him no, and he said, "No, you're going to be Santa Claus, whether you like it or not."
Yeah.
And I tell you, I did a good job because everybody had a good time. I was a comedian. He gave me all these punchlines to throw out.
Yeah.
And then there was another thing we did on Fridays. We'd have these little skits where I was a news commentator. He built this little facade, like a TV screen thing, and we do current events. It was for social studies, and I was the star of that. I was the anchor man for that show, and he really put me in a really neat light.
And so when you had that experience, you also wanted to be able
a teacher.
To do it yourself.
One of the things I remember that I vividly remember was one time he brought this, what was it, magazine. It was either not Time, but it was
Look or one of those.
It was Newsweek.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah. At least,
he brought that out one day and he opened it. It was our math class, and he says, "I want you guys to pass this around." And it was the invention of the credit card. And he goes, He goes, "Did you guys get what's in this article?" And nobody knew what.
Yeah.
Nobody could even comprehend it. 6th grade, 1966.
Right. Yeah.
And he goes, "What this article is telling us is that one day, when you grow up, the credit card is going to be used in the place of money." And we all just like, what? You know, like that kind of thing. And,
right.
And, you know, lo and behold. And then I think when I was in the 70s in college, the barcode thing came out in the same math class.
Yeah.
And they told us that was going to be the next thing,
Yeah.
you know. And, you know, and just like my grandfather was, it's something I could relate to because my grandfather, Hopi grandfather, all my grandfathers, they grew up seeing so many changes in their lifetime. When my grandfather was 92 years old, he died when he was about 99. My Hopi grandfather told me one time, he says, you know what, I've had a great life. He goes, I've seen a lot of things in my life. He goes, I saw the steam locomotive. I saw the diesel locomotive. I worked for the Santa Fe Railroad in Winslow. I went to World War I. I was the 1st Regiment of the National Guard. I got to travel the world, you know, by being an Army, you know, infantryman. But and he said, I got to experience that. And he says, I got to go on a boat all the way across the ocean. He goes, if I could live if I was younger, what I would have really liked to have done is fly in an airplane. You know, so he had that kind of positive thing,
right.
outlook on life. And I think that's where I got it from.
Yeah,
definitely.
He must have, because at that same time, all those other things went on, like World War I that he was in, all the horror that went there. 1918 pandemic influenza probably killed lots of people.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of how my grandmother died, was from one of those diseases that, early on.
Which, on the Hopi side?
Yeah, my grandmother's name was Amelia Albert. She comes from the Talaventiwa family, and which her grandfather was, I found out, was Hevehema from not Badger Clan. He was, I guess, Snake Clan or Badger Clan from Old Araibi. I didn't even know this till just like a couple of months ago. My cousin was doing all that research I was telling you about, Nick Brogueshoulder.
And you're still learning.
Yeah, I'm still learning. But see, all that stuff was kept quiet.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, and then I found out my grandfather had another brother who was Snake Clan who ended up in Chipalabi. For some reason, he told me another story about that. He said, not all of them went to Hoadville. Some of the clan members went to other villages that had Snake Clan.
That clearly was a very pivotal time.
Yeah,
for
it
Hopi
was.
culture.
You can imagine the turmoil.
Is that still problematic?
It is not so much. I would just say nostalgically wise, it's not a personal thing anymore.
Yeah,
that
generations have passed.
That older generation, they had that
angst
about what people were telling them,
they were
and
conservative on
yeah.
We left, you didn't.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of other villages were involved too, because it was political. You know, it was like, whose side are you on? You know, are you on that side?
Yeah, we know how that works today, right?
Oh yeah, it's like exactly. That's what I'm.
So when you went to NAU at that point to say, okay, I'm going to become a teacher.
Yeah.
And that
that was a great experience, because I got into the education department at NAU.
And were you carving?
I was
Hopi?
carving. I was, you know, that was something, being Hopi, growing up Hopi on my dad's side, was I always was doing that, painting, carving.
Yeah. So you always had this artistic kind of something going on.
And that's one of the things that Hopi culture does, is that they always tell you, you can always make a good living, because we have these things, these resources that we pass on.
And that's kind of more what you looked at it as, versus going, I could make this as an actual job or a profession.
Yeah. And I would do this in my dorm room all the time, just because we didn't have, you know, you didn't have TV in the dorm rooms, in your own room. Right. Not like today, everybody has everything. Like,
and did you look at it as, okay, this is a way I can make extra money as well?
Yeah, that's the way I looked at it, was just to expand my opportunity to have a good week.
Where would you sell those? Where would you go?
I was very lucky I wouldn't say lucky right off the bat. I did have my foot in the door, because my grandfather sold to the museum gift shop at the Northern Arizona Museum.
What was he selling?
He sold his dolls.
He was doing dolls too, okay.
And he was also a weaver, a Hopi weaver. So he would sell that more to the native people side, but when they'd order something.
So you could carve your dolls, take them up to the museum.
I would go up there. I remember, but the first time I went, I was really scared. And but luckily, one of the gift shop manager was Helen Turner, and she remembered. She's, well, what's your name, boy? And I was a young guy. You know, I was like 19 years old. And I said, Duane Maktima. He goes, oh, is your grandfather a guy? And I said, yeah, that's my grandpa. And he goes, oh, okay, well, let me look at your dolls.
Right.
And they were like, a doll that big was $20, you know, and $20 in my pocket.
Would they buy it outright?
Yeah, they would buy everything outright. I would take 1 or 2 a week, and she says, "Yeah, we."
You were carving like crazy.
Yeah. Well, you know, I could do a doll in a day.
Yeah.
You know, and so like as long as I finished 1 or 2 a week, that was extra spending money on the weekend. So and then I went to Sedona to do. You know, I had a little thing going on with shops down there.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, one day I was taking this graduate course class because I needed an elective in the education department, and so I took a summer class to get my what do you call them, your class you know, your what do you call them, the like each class is 2
electives,
credits or whatever. Yeah,
to get your credits.
So I had to take this course. It was way beyond what I could. I was a graduate course, and I was an undergraduate.
I see.
So it was a bilingual class. So I actually asked my advisor, my education advisor, is it okay if I take this class? And
this was an elective?
Yeah,
maybe?
it was for teachers on the res.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, yeah, you could take this class. Just don't, you know, it's probably above where you want to be, but, you know, just go for it. And that was probably the best thing I did in it, because I was on the other end of the stick.
Yeah, you were the kid that was struggling to get it done.
These were the teachers, and they were wondering how to teach Native kids.
Right.
And I was the guinea pig. I was like the kid that told them what to do.
Right.
And they really got out. I really made an impact on the teacher. So one day the professor comes. He was really well known in that field, bilingual education. So one day he calls me over to his office. He says, hey, Duane, come over to my office for a minute. He says, I really appreciate you being in this class. He goes, you give a whole new perspective to this group of teachers that are supposed to know how to teach any kind of kid, and you're telling them otherwise, like what they're doing wrong, you know, in teaching Native kids.
Yes.
He goes, I really respect that. Thank you very much. He goes, you're Hopi, right? And he saw my name. He knew me. Yeah, because I used to work on the Navajo and Hopi res when I was doing my teaching years. He said, you're obviously talented if you're Hopi. What do you do? I said, I carve and I paint. I tell you what, bring me some of your dolls, and I collect a few things. So that's how it started. And
you're
every week
20 at this point?
Yeah, and he goes, I would like this doll, you know, like an ogre or whatever, a wolf kachina or whatever. And then I'd bring that in at the end of the week, and then he just got to where I want 2 more dolls, and then the other faculty members started seeing what he was getting, and then they started ordering stuff. I had a whole business going on in my dorm room, which is pretty amazing. And at about that time, he goes, what is your major? And I said, education. He goes, you're in the wrong major. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you should be an art major. I said, nah, you can. I said, nah. I told him, I said, he goes, no, I'm not kidding. I'm serious, Duane. You got to be an art major. And I said, you can get a degree in art. I remember that's what I told him. I said, you know, I'm really ignorant.
Yeah, well, why would you know?
Yeah, and so he goes, I tell you what. He goes, the art department, the Creative College of Fine Arts is right there across the parking lot. Go over there right now. And what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm just nothing the rest of the day. He says, why don't you go over there? And nah, I don't want to be an art major. I want to be in education. Well, I tell you what, I want to make you an ultimatum. He goes, either you go over there today, this afternoon, or I'm going to make an appointment for you. I said, okay, I'll go. And he was really cool. So he told me where the art office was. Go up there and ask who, tell him what you're staying over from me, that you want to talk to an advisor, what it all entails to be an education art major. And so he said, you can always teach art. If you're in education, you can teach art. That's what he told me. And I said, yeah, that's a good point. So, you know, lo and behold, the first studio I go to, the second floor, like he told me to go, was the jewelry studio. There's all this pounding and hammering. And I get up the stairs and open the door, and there's a jewelry case on the wall. And I went up to it, and I go, holy moly, this is cool.
And was a lot of it Native artists in there?
No.
Or was everybody?
But who was the guy that answered the door? I looked in the little window.
Yeah, who is it?
And there's Victor Beck sitting there.
Oh, my gosh.
Open the door. Hey, can I help you? He tells me, and I said, yeah. How do you get into this class? And I was like, well, like I said, 20 years old, and Victor was about 34 that time. And he goes, have you ever made jewelry before? And I said, no. And he goes, I had long hair then. He goes, well, he kind of says, are you Hopi? Because I looked Hopi. Yeah. He goes, yeah, I'm Hopi. He goes, well, come on with me. So he goes, let's go talk to. I'm Victor Beck. I'm the student assistant to the professor. So I go in there. He takes me to the Mr. Brookins' offices. He looks at me and he goes, Mr. Brookins. He goes, Jake. He goes, this man here, this young guy who wants to take a class. And so I told him about you talk to you. He says, oh, okay, well, are you an art major? I said, no. He goes, I'm just got here. I was on my way to the office because I'm an education major. He goes, you're Hopi, right? And I said, yeah, I'm Hopi. He goes, well, you obviously have talent. He says, but you need to take these prerequisites. I tell you what, he goes, take drawing and three-dimensional design, those two. You might have to go to summer school. I said, I'll do it. So he goes, and bring me your portfolio before fall registration.
And you didn't have a portfolio?
No, I had nothing. And so I took those two classes, and I went over to see him immediately before fall registration, and he signed off. He goes, yeah, I'll let you in this class. So I got in, and right away Victor Beck had me sitting right next to him. He goes, you sit right here with me. He goes, and I picked up in 6 weeks I had my own style. And then I ended up helping Victor. Like Victor was already a student / jewelry manufacturing business,
Yeah.
And he worked for all these shops in Sedona and Camp Verde and Phoenix and Byron Hunter. He used to do a lot of stuff.
Was this be your sophomore or junior year?
That's probably about sophomore year.
Yeah. So you end up getting a degree in art.
Well, it didn't happen right away.
Yeah.
That first semester, Jake Brookins called a meeting and says, "Hey, I'm retiring." And there was some political stuff going on in NAU at that time, I guess, some in the departments or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he just figured it was a good time to leave. So he ended up getting another offer at the Museum of Northern Arizona with Herman Bleibtreu, who was the department head here at U of A in anthropology. So he goes up there to be interim director. Mm-hmm. Because Mr. Danson resigned, and he retired.
Yeah, Ted Danson's dad.
Yeah, Ted Danson's father, Ned. Yep. So, and I got to know him pretty well, and so Herman came in, and they had this, brainstorming, and they thought, let's do an art institute here, and so Jake Brookins happened to be the one that was going to run it, to be the director of it. So we had National Endowment funding and all this, and we had like Charles Lolem on the board and Alan Hauser and all these.
And were you involved in that?
No, I was a student. Yeah, I was an intern. So they picked 3 artists to be interns there. Victor Beck, myself, and Robert Lamarupke from Hopi, who lived in Flagstaff. So I quit my academic part there at NAU, and I went up there. It's still some sort of learning process,
but really focused on the art.
Yeah, but focusing on they gave us a studio and a stipend and access to the museum archives.
Oh yeah, you would definitely quit for that.
God,
yeah,
it was incredible.
You get to make art.
That's all I got to do, and I got paid for it.
Yeah.
So. And then being around already other creative people who were older than me.
And would Lolema come and do things, or was
he was just on the board.
He was more on
just an advisor.
Same with Hauser.
Yeah, same with Hauser and those other people. But we had you probably remember Guy and Doris Spontan that did he was a professor at NAU in the commercial art division or college, and he wrote the book. Him and his wife wrote the book Art and the Indian Individualist. Remember, it had Fritz Scholder. It was that first book that came out about contemporary Indian art.
Right.
They were friends of ours.
Oh wow!
And Mr. Montan used to photograph my work, and Doris wrote an article for the very first issue of American Indian Art magazine.
I've got that issue. We were in that bookshelf.
We were
I'll have to pull it out.
We were in the first issue, and I think it was Doris that wrote that article, and I'm pretty sure it was.
But what was the article on?
It was just about us, the museum,
what they were doing,
Art Institute, what they were.
And how long did that institute last?
It lasted. It was a 3-year project. That's the way it was written up, and then the board of the museum would decide whether it was going to be something that could be accepted and, what would you say,
have legs and keep going.
Had exactly would something an asset to the museum.
Right.
Unfortunately, it didn't. Sciences is more where they wanted to be.
So did you get? You did the whole 3 years?
I did the 3 years, and that's again where culture, your identity as a cultural artist, really struck home there, because that's when I realized I got to get home now. Everybody's calling me an artist, and I don't want that title until I go back home and live and get to know what my mom's side of the family is about. And that's when I moved.
And that was about 20 or so, 21?
I was about 22, 23, somewhere.
So you do a couple years at NAU, 3 years in the program, museum, and then you go to Laguna.
Yeah. And then I stayed there. I was around 1976, 77. And then I left there 79, 80. I came back that's when I met my wife, and I ended up actually leaving Laguna in kind of a desperate situation.
Why is that?
Because, art doesn't survive there.
Oh, yeah. So you're there for 2 years, but you still have to survive somehow.
Oh, my God. It was terrible.
What were you doing? Making jewelry
I was
at that
making
time?
jewelry, which was cool for me. Luckily, at that time, I didn't have any responsibilities. I wasn't married, wasn't tied down to anything. But I was very poor.
Yeah. And you were living with your mom's...
My grandmother, one of my extended grandparents, part of the family. That was the greatest thing ever, though.
Yeah.
I was there. I was staying with my uncle at first and my aunt, and they told me, you really want to know what goes on? We should live in the village. I said, yeah, I want to live in the village. We'll go talk to you. We have another aunt and uncle. They called them aunt and uncle. Said there'd be your grandparents on your grandma's side. They were a Riley family, and so he was a war chief for many, many years, and so it was awesome living. I was a runner at the time.
Did you recognize that you were doing something that was making you a more complete person?
Yeah, that's really what I didn't know it directly that was the ambition of it, but man, I look back now and I said, oh my God, I had the best of a lot of things, and that was one of them because I don't know, how would you say, if you don't leave, if you don't go when you're young, if you don't experience a lot of things outside what goes on in your culture, then even though it would be awesome if you could do that, but in today's world, it's just very difficult. And I did find myself short in a lot of ways. I was, like I said, I was poor. I didn't have being an artist there I could never get any work done.
Plus, where do you go to sell it? You're at Laguna, right? There's no outlets, right? I guess you go to Albuquerque?
No, I go to... but that was limited. It wasn't very many venues, and nobody liked contemporary.
And you were doing kind of contemporary style at that time.
Nobody liked contemporary at that time.
Yeah, unless you were doing Lolima.
Yeah,
did you do any of that style, that kind of Lolima-esque?
Not really. I still wanted to have this flavor of traditional, and it was like the newest thing was I would do this overlay type work, which I had my unique style called box overlay. And it was a shadow, remember the quote, shadow box Navajo jewelry look?
Yeah.
But I would do it with the Hopi motifs and then do inlays on the side of it, or kind of, it really was really nice.
Had you found your voice as a silversmith for what you wanted to be, or were you still looking?
I was pretty content with what I had something that people who knew what emerging talent was, that they would like. I would do indie market. I did it. I started indie market in 1973, 74.
Did you get in the first time you applied?
Well, this is another story. Victor Beck used to tell me, he goes, he used to call me nephew because I was his grunt. I used to do everything for Victor. Cut me some stones. No, I'll do it for you. And then I need help. Can you make these bezels for me? He said, yeah, because I got this big order. And then I'd be his driver because he used to work like a maniac. He would work all night and be dead tired. He says, nephew, I need help. I said, what are you doing? He says, I got to deliver this order to Phoenix. Can you drive me? Yeah, I'll drive you. And I'll buy you a steak dinner after we go. And he'd sleep the whole way down there and go deliver his stuff. And he says, all right, I got paid. Let's go eat some steak. So we'd go do that. And then we'd drive all the way back to Phoenix, to Flagstaff in one day. And so Victor one day, he goes, you know, you're pretty quiet. I said, and I didn't say nothing. He goes, you got to start doing some shows. You got to show people you're good. Your work's really good. He says, you got to do some shows. And I said, nah, I don't want to do shows. And one day he goes, well, you got to go to Santa Fe Indian Market. And I said, what for? And he goes, because your work's really good. He said, you had to go and you got to let people see what you do.
And you'd never gone before?
No, I never even knew what Santa Fe Indian Market was. And he goes, well, I don't want to go. He says, I tell you what, you're going anyway. I already got you a booth.
So he got you in.
My first Indian Market booth in 1974 was $45.
I bet that changed your life.
It did, because he goes, so he tells me what's going to happen, what's going to take place. He goes, we're going to leave here like probably Thursday night. We'll go as far as Gallup, stay the night, and then go up there early, and get to, on Friday morning, we'll go deliver our pieces for judging. I didn't know what he was talking about. So we get there, we go enter our stuff, and next morning we get up early. I'm staying with him at the La Fonda. He gets a room at the La Fonda.
That's high rising right there.
Yeah, well, I didn't even know what the heck the Fonda was, but it was a neat place. So we go, he goes, we'll get up early and we'll go get our stuff at the, So we go and we find all these ribbons all over our work.
Wow.
And I won first place like for 3 or 4 things.
Wow.
So I think, wow, man.
And you get money for that, too.
Yeah, I got money for that. Got a check right away. And then they put me where they put me the first year.
Yeah.
They put me in front of Packard's.
Oh, my God.
Right on the left side where the crosswalk is, right by the door on the left. Right, I'm right
and
there.
And this is like 73, too, which is a great time. And so you sold out, probably.
I sold out like within an hour.
And you go, oh, my God.
All them, the members of the SWI organization, that old money group of people that used to be in Santa Fe, they just came to my booth and bought me out and gave me a lot of encouragement.
Yeah.
A lot of them I remember they were older people, and they were saying, young man, this is amazing. Who are you and where are you from and all this stuff. And they said, you're going to have a bright future ahead of you. That's all I remember was saying, keep it up. You're doing something
So
good.
It was life-changing for you.
Yeah, it was very.
And you saw yourself as a silversmith at that point, Fawn? Really, as a real silversmith?
Not an artist, but just somebody who knew had an idea what to do in quality, do something quality. Victor Beck used to stress that a lot to me. Quality, what did he used to say? Original. He says, be original, be unique.
Right, original thought,
original
voice.
Yeah, and you do that, do something that nobody else is doing, you'll always have a place.
And did those ribbons enforce that?
Yeah. And he was real proud of it, and I didn't really know what it was. It was just a ribbon. And he told me, oh, this is going to be awesome. And so I started entering shows like the Hopi Show and Gallup Ceremonial. And then the next year I went to Indian Market again, and this time with a bigger idea what to do.
Right.
And I had a friend who was a carpenter, and I said, "Can you make me a jewelry case?" And he made me a jewelry case, and it was really amazing. I remember I worked hard all summer to get 25 pieces, and I had a whole different new look that was evolving. And so I said, "I'm really going to be ready this year." So I go to Indian Market again. This time I go with Victor again. We room together again at the La Posada. We get a room this time. So we go enter our stuff, and again, the same thing. We win all these awards again. And
were you in front of Packard's again?
No, they put me down in front of the Guarantee. Remember?
Where
the department store?
Yeah, right.
They put me right in front of there, which is another good spot.
Yeah.
I sold out in half a day. I had some amazing pieces. I kept sketches of those pieces. I used to sketch everything. I still do pretty much. And so that was because of Jake Brookins. He used to tell me the professor, the jewelry arts professor at NAU.
Yeah.
He used to tell me, get you a sketchbook and sketch everything.
Yeah. And do you still do that?
I still do it. Yeah. And so
that'd make a cool book.
Yeah. I mean, it sometimes it's actually part of the provenance I have with the older work. People will send me and like, can you value this piece for me?
Is this yours? Right.
You know what? I have the drawing of this, so I'll scan that and send it to him. And
so you won again.
Yeah,
you
get sold out by half a day. I was done, and it was the first time I ever made over like $2,000.
Were you married yet?
No, I was just free as a bird. I was like, well, the first thing I did with all this money was I always bought equipment.
Yeah.
Upgraded. And reinvested in more silver, and I think that time I bought a little bit of gold, and it was like it was mind blowing to buy a little tiny piece of gold was like $60, and that to me that was like outrageous, and where today is the same little piece is like $1,000.
Right.
But no, it was really amazing, to see that encouragement through just showing what you do, and I was very innocent looking too. I was just really.
You're a kid.
Ready for kid. I was ready to. Anything was exciting to me.
And have you continued doing Indian markets since '73?
Yeah, I've been. This is gonna be. I'm coming this summer. This is gonna be my 45th year consecutively doing Indian market.
And that's a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And what have you seen changed in that from that first time when you're in front of Packers, or the second time in front of the Guarantee?
Well, there was only 75 booths.
Oh wow! Yeah.
In 1970.
God, how many are there now? I don't know.
770 or something like that.
Yeah.
I still have great Indian markets. I'm one of those. I feel very confident. I used to worry like, wow, I wonder how this year's going to be. It's a collector show, which and I'm just so grateful that there are people out there that receive that, really look forward to it and go, and the artists receive that, diligently by creating the best stuff they can create.
So you still see it being kind of as it has been?
Yeah, for a while there, I kind of wondered. I thought it was getting too big. Of course, your clientele was telling me that it's too big. I'm not coming anymore. Some of them would say it's too crowded. And
right.
But that group, that was like 20 years ago, and it was a reason. I don't like crowds, but that's one weekend you have to deal with it.
You stay at the La Fonda?
Yeah. No, I live 16 miles away.
Well,
So
you're Indian market.
I'd rather sleep in my own bed. Yeah, I'm at that point, where it's just nice to. My wife and I, Jan, it's just like what would you say? Like putting a pair of shoes on. It's like
right.
you know what you got to deal with. You got to get up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Be out the door by 4:45. You
still enter pieces for
no,
judging?
I don't enter anymore. I gave that up probably 20 years ago. Being my like I said, I wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Well, when I went to Santa Fe after I graduated, that was all the research that I had did in art. Studied all kinds of art history of all the world, and I had something to show now. I had the credentials. I knew where my destiny was going to take me, and what I had to do was move to Santa Fe.
And what year was that?
1981.
So okay,
so,
and that was from where were you living when you moved?
In Flagstaff.
You were okay.
Yeah,
so
I was just graduated from college, and all this research I was doing, it all pointed me to the School of American Research in Santa Fe. So I applied. They had a fellowship, art fellowship. There was the Catcher and Lamont Fellowship, and then the SWIA organization had the SWIA Artist Fellowship, and it was the second year they had it, and I received both of them.
So you got the SWIA Fellowship
and the Catcher and Lamont Fellowship from the School of American Research.
SAR.
Yeah, SAR, and SAR was really important for me to experience, because all the research I had done on the history of Native American art, a lot of it was because of Maria Martinez at the school SAR, her and her husband.
Julian.
And so it was like, I got to get there, man. I got to be part of that. And I was very lucky. With this fellowship, I went over there. They introduced me they had a big meeting,
Sure.
like a luncheon to present the award. And I was really well accepted there. And they said, this is your museum. Anytime you want to come here to study, or
because you can get access to the holdings. And then did they give you a little place right there on SAR?
Well, it didn't happen right off the bat. But about 3 or 4 years later, I was like on a what would you call it, a sounding board committee. In time that they had these ideas, and one of the ideas they came up with was the mentor program. They were the impetus for that whole idea of mentoring. A master, whatever, artisan mentoring other people. Now this thing has caught on all over the nation. But Jan and I, my wife, were the first coordinators of the mentor program.
And that was through SAR?
That was through SAR.
And the idea was to take master artists and help.
And craft, in Pueblo crafts, was to go to the villages and just introduce ourselves as our host. We were going to be the host and hostess if you come to the museum and want to look at the collections. And it was a 3-generation experience we wanted to recruit. So we went to all the villages and went door to door knocking to meet artisans. Literally.
Wow.
Would spend the whole day in San Domingo or Picaris or Hopi, and just got to know people.
What was that like? Because some of the doors might not have been so happy.
Yeah, well, most of them, we went right away to the artists that were kind of known prominently.
Yes. Okay.
So that wasn't a bad thing. We met them at art shows usually and said, we'd like to come and visit you, and this is what we're doing. They all knew, because I was winning awards at the time, who I was, which was a nice thing, and they saw the success that we were having. And
so you were an ambassador.
Yeah, I was an ambassador, a diplomat for that whole era. And then, what was really unique was we had a lot of families come, traditional families, and we take them to lunch, and they pay for all their rooms. The museum, SER, pays for all their expenses to get there. They get them a room, and if they want to stay overnight, and we would take them to lunch or dinner, and we'd sit with them, and we'd hear their a lot of times they were just crying out, like they wanted, I think the one thing I heard one time was a medicine man who was a potter, and he made moccasins. He did all the, and he says, this is what I've always wanted to do, was to be like you, an artist. But I can't do that because there's another calling that I had. I never realized that I never knew I was going to do this, be this medicine person.
And he was an older guy.
Well, he was about my age.
Oh yeah, so he had found a route that.
Yeah, and it took him another direction. He says, I don't have no time for myself anymore. Yeah. He goes, and I felt really bad about it. I felt like, oh my God, look how privileged I am. And I thought, in that respect, I thought about it, and I told Jan, I said, we were talking about it. And luckily, I was their ambassador, their diplomat.
Yes.
And I would take that back to the director.
Swartz, maybe.
No, it was Michael Herring and Doug. Not Doug. It was Duane Anderson.
Duane Anderson, yeah.
At the time.
Yeah.
Doug Swartz had just retired.
Okay.
So. So I would take it to them, and they would say, "Well, let's do a purchase award. Let's get this guy, let's get some of his work in here and put it in, get it in the museum collection." And that was really cool. I could make stuff like that happen, and
maybe affect his life to go. Yeah, maybe I can be an artist.
At least give him the incentive to keep up his craft, because he was doing traditional work, which those were dying art forms at the time.
Yes.
So so that was a good thing. We were working towards something really viable.
Is SAR still doing this kind of stuff?
Yeah, but see, this is what was cool. I did a 3-year project with them, and then I wanted to get back to my own work, and we had a big meeting at the end of our 3-year contract, and they said, well, what would you recommend us do? Well, how would this mentor program really succeed from what you've gathered, all this stuff you've experienced? And I said, build a studio here on campus. And that studio they have now, that was because of what we recommended.
So people can come and use it.
Actually come here and stay here and work here.
Right.
And so that happened, and that was the best thing, that came out of that. And that was, my career was just really booming then. I really wanted
Still is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really wanted, and then another thing came up. We were doing so well, successfully in what Indian market and all I had a gallery in town. I was started out with Dewey Galleries in Santa Fe. Then I went to Wadle Galleries, and we were doing phenomenally well. And again, the opportunity came up. Lane Coulter at IAI calls me up one day and says, hey, we need a jewelry program, instructor. He says, would you be interested? I said, well, yeah. He goes, well, the reason I'm calling you is because we have this contract with San Domingo, and we're training San Domingo craftsmen to be silversmiths now. And they've contracted IAI. They bust up a group of people from San Domingo. These were older people, and it got competitive in San Domingo. Everybody was making hishi and beads, and they wanted to do something different. So I was their teacher for that.
And you did that through IAI?
Yeah. And
how long did you do that?
I did that for about 4 years.
Wow.
And so but I also brought in other kids from the school itself. They came in and intermingled with that group.
Don't you find it interesting that
amazing.
You're still a teacher?
Yeah.
I mean, you're a silversmith, a jeweler, a craftsman, but at your heart, it seems like you're still always teaching involved.
That education part is like, how would you say? That's part of what you get when you acquire a Duane Maktima piece. is you get you get that other knowledge of that whole experience that I've experienced in my life. And that's
which
just
really
a good thing.
relates right back to your 6th grade teacher.
It does.
The guy in college that says you need to be an artist.
It's that whole thing that we all love, and that success. You know, we like that evolution that we all follow, and we have all share that path together. And I think it just makes it something of much more value when people, you know, there's a lot of people I've met that don't even need jewelry. They don't even wear jewelry, but for some reason they say, you know, Duane, you really made an impact on us. My wife wants to buy something from you, and I say, or order something custom. I do a lot of custom work.
Right, yeah, some fantastic custom
it's
stuff.
It's just awesome that I get those kind of opportunities to make things for just that individual, which you'll never see ever again. And usually those are the most dynamic.
And it's hard to get custom things. I can tell you as a gallerist, trying to get anybody, whether it's a painter or a silversmith, or you know, to actually make it happen on time and all that.
Yeah, no, that's one thing about us that's made us very successful, is the fact that it happens. I know that how to do that. I know, it's like
you're a professional.
That's professional at it, responsible, and have some sort of integrity about it.
Yes,
that people acknowledge it, which is pretty amazing. God, I'm just blessed in that regard, and it goes back to a lot of things. That discipline probably came from, I always use this as another example of my mother being Pueblo Indian from Laguna, New Mexico. They're Catholic people. Mm-hmm. My grandparents were very devout Catholics and practiced their native religion very thoroughly, in Laguna. On the Hopi side, they're not. Their religion is their Hopi culture,
right?
Which is great. It's all the same thing. But I grew up. At 9 years old, I remember in Holbrook, we were asking me the demographic of the community, what Native American population is. Well, there were a lot of Indian kids there. Mm-hmm. And I remember we all hung out together, and some families were disciplined and some weren't. And I remember I got into this one group of kids that were troublemakers. Mm-hmm. And they would just, I didn't want to say no or go hang out with them. They'd say, let's go play baseball in the morning. Oh, okay, I'd go over there. And then one day they wanted to go to the grocery store to get something, batteries or something. And I just went along, and here they were stealing stuff. Yeah. They got caught. I was already out the door, and the manager came running at me. And I was just walking home because I got tired of waiting around for them. Anyway, they caught me, and they took me in with that group of kids and took us to the police station. Luckily, our neighbor was the chief of police. Yeah. And he knows my dad. He knows me real well. And he goes, come over here. He goes, you don't belong in here. Let's go. You go home. And so I take off. But he says, but I'm going to have to tell your dad. I said, oh. So my dad punishes me. And my mom, of course, felt bad about it. So that weekend, this was like the next weekend, Saturday, she goes, come with me. And I said, where are we going? And I was 9 years old. And she goes, never mind, you just come with me. So we're walking down about 2 blocks in Holbrook down to where the Catholic church is, and she takes me to what do they call them, the
confessional thing?
No, where the priests stay. Well, it's their house.
Yeah.
So she rings the doorbell, and Father comes to the door. She goes, hello, Father Burns. And he said, and he goes, oh, hi, Josephine. That's my mother's name. He knew her, and he goes, oh, this is my son, Duane. He wants to be an altar boy. I went, no! At the door.
That was your punishment.
That was my... But I did that all my growing up years.
You stayed with it.
I stayed with it. Yeah. And it's really amazing. I never quit things.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it at first, but then I went to the first meeting, and all these other kids from school that I knew said, oh, we're going to have a lot of fun, man. Yeah. We go camping. They take us on a summer camping trip. And I said, that was what really caught my ear right there. So right. We go camping? We go fishing for a whole week. And I said, yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah,
so,
that sounds pretty good.
Who at 9 years old would be going down to the rectory, that was what the priests say. Yeah. And then they give you the key to serve mass like 3 times a week. At 5:30 in the morning.
Your mom saw it as giving you responsibility.
Rain, snow, shine. I'd be in there in the dark with a flashlight, opening up the door, the back of the church, setting up the altar. Yeah. The priests don't get there for another hour, and I'd be all dressed up, sitting there. And then he'd come in and say, "Good morning, Duane," and he'd give me a blessing, and then he'd say, "Okay." And then all the teachers would go to mass.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the ones that were Catholic.
Yeah. So where is your? So we've done an hour and 45 minutes. Where are you headed from here? What do you see from this?
Well, I think I'm in the how would you say, in the prime of my the metalsmithing art career that I've had. I'm 65 this coming year.
So get your jewelry fast, folks, right now. Medicine Man Gallery.
I've been doing some amazing commissions this past few years, which nobody gets to see really, but they're documented. I take pictures, images of them, and I've shared that with you. I send things.
Fantastic.
Yeah, when I get some of these things done, and I just really enjoy that part. I'm like the Amarin coming up. The artist in residence coming up.
And you'll be there for 2 months.
2 months.
And can people
January
see you
1st.
there?
Yeah, they can come and visit.
And you'll be making
I'll be
jewelry.
working. One of the cool things that I also sew moccasins, so I'll do that one day and just sit there and
you've done that for a long time, right?
Yeah. And then this year we're having ambition to build a horno oven at the Ameren for the cooks there.
Meaning you and your wife want it.
Yeah, well, they want it. They were the ones that thought about
cool.
it, and they can teach a class in bread baking or whatever.
Right.
That's a Spanish oven, or influence. So I got to think about the logistics of that, how that's all going to work.
So you'll get an orno built.
Hopefully we're started on it anyway this year.
Yeah.
And but it's just an incentive to be part of the. I think the Museum of Northern Arizona experience at 1970s. It's just made me really fond of working in the museum setting. I just really enjoy that because I'm how would you say, I'm a teacher and educator in those museums, and people come there with total ignorance a lot of times, not knowing. This is a living Native American here, sitting here doing this work.
Right.
Then I get off on these tangents of like, well, how did you? Then the same story what we're talking here. That's kind of what happens, and I end up educating people.
Yeah. So they get to understand who you are, what you are, and your path.
A lot of them are just really floored. It's like, oh my God, I never knew this really happened. I'm sorry.
Pretty amazing. Yeah.
I mean, they apologize for it. A lot of times they're going, "What do you mean you're sorry?" It's like, it's like, look at me. I'm a positive person. I think, and I mean, if any experience you've had about thinking natives are desperate and all this, I said, don't. We're all given choices, right?
Yeah. And
I'm just very fortunate and blessed that I had elders, grandparents, and family that saw the future
and kept you online.
Kept me gave me that opportunity to go ahead and do it. Those doors open, and you got to go through them. Right?
Walk through the window or the door when
it's time.
And clearly, you've walked through every door. That's been given to you.
I'm very blessed in what I've achieved in the art world. It's just a good. I love what I do. I still passionately love what I do.
We're thrilled to have you as an artist in the gallery here and show your work and promote you.
Well, even for me to get to this point here, being represented with you in Medicine Man Gallery, Mark Sublette, a lot of integrity. The museum, it's a museum. Actually, that's the way I look at your gallery.
Nice. We'll take that.
It's like a lot of integrity here, and I like working with people.
Yeah. I love working with you too. And it's been a thrill to have you on the show and. We'll get it out there and let people know more about it.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that will be long term. That's the way I look at things. I mean, based on hopefully just good character and friendship.
That's right.
That's all we can do. I mean, how would you say talk to Mark and talk to me about what your inquisitive nature always brings us to things that just opens up a lot of doors.
I learn every time, and this was one of really fantastic.
I really love learning. I love hearing other people's stories as well. A lot of times we end up finding that we share a lot of things.
Yeah, there's threads
in life.
Oh, there's definitely threads.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and my doors are always open. And that's one thing Jan, my wife, has been able to accept over the year. I'm very flattered and thankful that I've been shared with a lot of people.
Yeah.
There was times where she says, I don't know about this, like,
right.
You're always going places. You're always, people are always asking you to do things. And I said, well, I kind of think that's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So but we have 2 grown kids. They're adults and they're on their own, and they all grew up making jewelry.
Yeah.
I never stressed this is the way their life was going to be. I always told them to find their own way in life, but this is just something you should know.
But look at forestry.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, I love where I live is the result of that whole loving the mountains. I live in Glorieta, New Mexico. We're at close to 7,200 feet.
It's gorgeous
elevation. So I love the mountain country, and one of my other passions is fishing, fly fishing, and hunting.
So here's our thread.
Yeah.
So I grew up always fishing the Pecos River.
Oh.
The whole time as a kid, I would always go up and fish the Pecos.
Oh my God! So you know my son is a professional fly fisherman.
He's one of the best.
So
all right, we're gonna get together and go fishing.
we got to do that. we got to do that. We take some nice trips now and then. I just do nice quality things with him. Once or twice a year, we get to go do something together.
Now we're gonna go sell your jewelry because we have an open. Trunk show today, and of course this won't show when the trunk's going on, but we'll have his work in our gallery at all times.
Yeah, I'm going to be represented now,
and it's online for us
for
too.
eternity here at Sublette Gallery.
Yeah,
and I'm looking forward to what we develop here.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
thank you, Wayne.
Thanks.
Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, ebooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.